everybody, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for being here today. Today's video, we are focusing on eyeshadow. We're gonna be talking about some eyeshadow basics, some blending techniques, some different brushes, and things like that, just to emphasize your eyes. Before we get started, make sure that you are subscribed to my channel and that you've clicked the notification bell so that you can be notified when we upload videos. Make sure that you're following me on social media, which will be popping up right here below me. So with all that said, let's go ahead and get started. So before we get started on actually applying eyeshadow to our lids, I wanted to go over some brushes with you guys and talk about different brush shapes and what those can do, and kind of the essentials that I think are necessary for creating honestly any type of look. So we're gonna start out with talking about blending brushes. So these are great for applying the initial shadow that you're gonna put down, the transition shade. They're very large brushes. I mean, they really cover most of the surface area of your lid. Everyone has different sized eyelids, so it really just depends on you. For me, I don't know, I feel like I have pretty average sized eyelids, I guess. I like to have a couple different sizes of blending brushes. So the first size that I tend to go for are the really big, fluffy blending brushes. And I use these to apply a skin tone shadow, the first light brown initial transition shade, whatever. And they are very fluffy. There's a lot of give in the way the bristles are individually packed. That is those two. And then I just have varying different sizes. I really don't think you need a ton of eyeshadow brushes. I just suggest having maybe one of each size that you prefer for just an everyday type of situation. So I love these two for that initial blending. And I wanted to talk a little bit about as far as eyeshadow brush shapes. Everyone has so many questions about them, and for me, I think it's all personal preference, and also thinking logically, like, what are they gonna do? So clearly, this flat topped blending brush right here is very loosely packed, so it's gonna apply things exactly flat. If I put it on a surface, all the bristles are gonna make contact with my skin, so they're gonna blend it out. Every bristle that has pigment on it on this brush will make contact with your skin. Therefore, that's how it's gonna look. As you can see here on my hand right here, it's applied almost like a diffused stripe. But the difference is, say I have a brush like this that is a bit more rounded at the top. I'm gonna take the exact same shadow, pack it on and tap it off. And on the other side of my hand over here, I'm gonna blend that out. I don't know, it's a very subtle difference, but here on this side of my hand that I use the rounded brush, obviously when I touch the brush to my skin, not every single bristle is gonna make contact. So therefore, as I move around and blend, each bristle is gonna have a different level of pressure to it. Therefore, it's gonna give you a bit more of a diffused look. That's personally my favorite shape. It just gives the most diffused look. I do enjoy this shape for specific things. I enjoy it for going at the very top, as I use this often as a clean brush with no product on it to blend over top to diffuse out the color further. But I prefer this for the initial application so that I'm getting a nice diffused look, because not every bristle is making direct contact with my skin upon the brush touching my eyelid. Whereas with the flat top brush, it is much more of a stripe. Now you can blend around and blend it out using your motions, using, you know, your hand motions and where you place the brush. You can blend it out that way. If I wanted to diffuse it, I would go over the edges with it. But with the more rounded type shape of brush, I prefer it because it does a lot of the diffusing for me with very minimal effort required. So now the other thing you'll notice between these two brushes right here is they actually have about the same amount of bristles. You can't tell because although this one is rounded, it is also a little bit more pointed at the end, whereas this one, it's got a wider surface area there, whereas this one has there's much bigger difference in the length of these tallest bristles to the very lowest ones on the side here. Whereas with this one, there is a difference in the length of the bristles, but it is not quite as stark as this one. It's probably the pointiest one I have. There are even more pointed blending brushes, such as this one. With this type of shape of brush, you are gonna get a more precise application, because when you touch this to your skin, the bristles that are coming into contact first with your skin are the tallest ones. It's gonna give you a lot more precise application. So I do prefer this for if I'm going specifically into my crease to kind of define it with a deeper shade, whereas with these larger ones with less of a point and more of a rounded shape are more for the transitional all over shades. So then after we have these large fluffy brushes, you have even smaller fluffy brushes that, you know, I'd say there's a decent amount of difference as far as size between this big size here and the smaller shape. So the main thing with these for me, honestly, just more precision. So I even have this really tiny blending brush that I love for taking the deepest shadow on my outer corners. And the other thing is these are a lot more densely packed than these other fluffy brushes. They're a lot more flimsy, and these are more densely packed bristles. And that gives me more pigmentation when I apply them. So the more densely packed the bristles are in the brush, the more pigment they're gonna put on your eye. It's pretty much a good golden rule. Even when you tap them off, just more pigment than what this would apply. Once I tap it off, this is gonna apply more pigment because the bristles are more densely packed, because there's not as much room for movement between the bristles as you blend. So that is this size. Same thing as far as shapes that I explained with these. It varies based on what shape you have to what kind of look you're gonna get. Same thing as I explained before. The next type of brush that I really enjoy are another type of fluffy blending brush. But the main difference with these is, as you can see, they are pinched to where when I turn them the other way, they are thinner from one side and wider from the other. As you can probably assume by the shape, they're gonna give you a more precise application. They're gonna blend in a line. These are a great brush to have if you're really not looking to have a ton of brushes, because these types of brushes are very versatile because you can blend them in a more precise way, going in that straight line with the more pinched side, or you can blend it the other way and really blend that line out further with the wider side. So that's those. Next are packing brushes, which I don't really know exactly what they're called, but they're packing shader brushes, whatever. They are very flat brushes with a bit, depending on the brush, with a bit of fluff to them, but they are mainly flat. They are for packing shadow onto the lid. They are great for applying shimmers. They are great for applying mattes if you're packing on a matte shadow for a smoky eye. And I have varying sizes here. I have these little bitty ones if I want to be really precise when I'm applying my shimmer shadows. And I have these really big ones for if I'm just applying a shimmer all over my lid, a shimmer or a matte all over my lid. So I really enjoy those for that. And the last type of brush I have are the type of brushes that I use for blending out eyeshadow on my lower lash line. So these are much smaller brushes, obviously. I have these two right here that are pencil brushes. I use these for the lightest shade that I'm gonna put on my lower lash line because they are much bigger than the other ones that I have here. They're gonna give me less precision, but they're gonna blend the eyeshadow on my lower lash line very quickly, very easily. And then I have a smaller version of that, basically, is a smaller pencil brush that I can use for my inner corner. If I wanted to put a little light shadow on my inner corner, I can use this, or I can use this again on my lower lash line to apply a deeper shadow closer to my lash line. And same with these. I just have these that are good for applying closer to the lash line. Now this brush right here from Real Techniques is probably my favorite. It's basically the size of a large pencil brush, but like the other blending brush that I just mentioned a minute ago, it is pinched to where it is thinner one way and wider the other way. Therefore, it gives me a nice diffused look underneath my eyes, but it is also precise. Whew, that was a lot of talking, Lord. So let's actually get into the application. Now we are all nice and zoomed in. I've taken my glasses off, so now I can't really see very well, but you know, that's what happens when you run out of contacts. So that's where we're at. But I have my nice mirror here that I'm gonna have to put real close to my face. And I'm sorry about that. For eyeshadow today, I'm gonna be using just some really simple brown mattes and some pretty simple shimmers. For that, in case you're wondering, it really doesn't matter because you can use whatever you have and whatever color story you want. I'm gonna be using the Makeup by Mario Master Mattes palette. It is a gorgeous palette that is just full of varying shades of matte browns, and it has a black over here as well. These are just some nice neutrals. And I really like this palette because I don't think a lot of palettes have a good gradient. They mostly have either medium shades to dark shades of mattes, or they have really light shades and they have really dark shades. I feel like there's not a lot of good in between, which is what I really enjoy about this palette here. It has an excellent array of matte browns. They go from the lightest pale shades all the way to a black. So that's what I'm gonna be using for mattes to start out with. I'm also gonna be using for these shimmers when we get there. This is the Kaja eyeshadows in the shade Toasted Caramel. This has 3 shimmers in it in a cute little package. It has, oh God, has really light shimmer shade, a nice medium shade, and a nice deep shade. So I really enjoy this little trio, and I have another one as well that has mattes in it, but this one is just shimmers, and I love the tones of these shimmers. So that's what we're using. Before we get into the eyeshadow, I'm gonna talk about priming products, and for the eyeshadow primer today, I'm gonna be using also from Makeup by Mario, the Master Eye Prep and Set palette, and this is the shade Light. So it has 2 cream shades up here that are meant to prime and conceal, and a translucent shade down here at the bottom to set it. Been using this, really enjoying it. These Makeup by Mario products are new. They are newer to me, but I have been using them a lot and I've really been liking them. So that's what we're gonna be doing today. Primers, as you guys know, I've kind of discussed this a little bit with you before. I'll mention it again in case you haven't seen my other videos that go over that. So a lot of people do use concealer as primer, which I don't mind at all. But for me, concealer tends to look really heavy on my eyelids. My eyelids are very dry and I don't want a thick layer of anything on them. And you can apply it very thinly, which is great. But just for me, I don't like my eyelids to be like super full coverage. I want to use the natural bit of natural shadow that my eyelids already have, so I don't want to completely cover them up. So I like a nice sheer coverage, even clear base for my eyeshadows. That's just personally what I prefer. And I do know that a lot of people use concealers and they work well. So if that's what you want for your eyelids, go for it. Yeah, so that's that. Other thing, a lot of people don't even believe in eyeshadow primers, which I think is fine. I do think you do need to prep your eyelids in some way, whether that's just with translucent powder, whatever, because for me, my eyelids will crease, and it's just a fact, and it happens. If I'm too lazy to put on primer, they're gonna crease for sure every time. So that's that. I'm gonna go ahead and apply this little priming situation. So I'm just gonna mix and dip between the 2 cream shades, the lighter and the deeper in this palette here. All right, I'm happy with that. So I'm just gonna take another little brush and go into the powder of this little primer over here. And I'm gonna set my eyelids. And honestly, powdering your eyelids before you go on with shadow, I find just helps a lot as far as if you're putting powder eyeshadows on your eye. Having already powdered your eyelids really helps with the blending process because you're putting powder onto powder and not putting the powder onto a wet surface, creamy surface that can possibly make the eyeshadow that you're using patch up a bit in different places. So I just prefer to set my eyelids before I go in with my eyeshadows. And honestly, you can also use like a skin tone shadow. Like if you get this Mario palette, these 2 cream shades up here at the top, the really pale one and then the nude one right here, would be great to set your eyeshadow primer with, or your concealer, whatever you're using. Look at that. I've got my Glossier hoodie and my Glossier Balm.com. How cute am I? Am I a cool Glossier girl now? Glossier, if you want me to be a rep for you guys, hit me up. I'm so down. Hit me up, I'm down. Okay, so we're gonna go into the actual eyeshadow palette now. There was lip balm in my teeth. Let's see, what am I feeling today? What am I feeling? I mean, they're all browns. They're just, it's gonna be brown. I mean, I know it's a big surprise. You know what, in my monitor here, in the screens that I'm looking at, this looks so much more vibrant, these shades. And in person, they are like so neutral. Mario, when he was creating this, said that like we're friends. Me and Makeup by Mario, Kim Kardashian's makeup artist. It's not a big deal. We're pals. We hang out. We chat. He said that this eyeshadow palette here was inspired by actual skin tones. So that's what most of these are modeled after, which I'd be right here between these mix of these two shades over here. I'd be a mix of those. Yeah, not quite as pale as that one, but definitely not dark as that one, right? Yeah. Maybe a little lighter than that one. Anyway, this was inspired by skin tones, so they're very nice skin toned neutrals, which I really love neutrals. I'm about that, so. Gosh, will I ever get started with the actual eyeshadow? Maybe not, I don't know. I'm gonna start out with that rounded, big, fluffy brush that I showed you guys in the beginning. And I think, I'm gonna start with this shade right here. So I'm just gonna dip into that. And I'm gonna hold my mirror below my eyes and look down, and that's how I find it easiest to find my crease to blend into. I definitely, wow. Crease. Wow. How do I have makeup on my hands? Somehow I got eyeshadow on my fingers and I rubbed it into my freaking eyelid. Dipping into that light shadow. I'm gonna look down at my mirror, holding it right below, and I'm gonna feel where my crease is in my eyeball here, socket, and I'm gonna just blend that shade into that area. And I'm using these nice like windshield wiper motions mainly, mixed with these little swirling circular motions. And that's how I prefer. Those are my two blending techniques that I use. A lot of people say that, makeup artists say that if you hold your brush towards the end, that's a lot easier as far as you'll have a nicer amount of pressure you're applying. But for me, I hold my brush about the middle. I control my own strength and I just use the lightest little touch. I'm just barely touching the brush to my eyes and I'm just blending it. Wow, you guys, I am so blind. It is serious. Who knows, this may not be the best eyeshadow look that I've ever done because I'm doing it on a day that I really cannot see. But you know, we'll do our best. We'll try it out. Maybe I'll switch mirrors in a second. So that's like a nice little yellow toned nudie color that I've blended into there. So I think I'm gonna continue on. So I'm actually gonna take the other really light brown here on the far side. It's just a bit more neutral toned than the other one that is a little bit more yellow toned. So I'm gonna take this one and blend it in the same area. That's that. So next, I'm actually gonna keep it really fluffy still with that other big fluffy brush that is more pointed to keep it a little bit more precise. I'm gonna go into my crease with, I'm really gonna use every shade in this palette, but you don't have to. I think I'm gonna start out with this shade and I might dip back and forth between these here as well on the end. But I'm gonna start out with this one. I'm gonna take my mirror that I can actually see into. And I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna look straight down into my mirror and I'm gonna feel out where my crease is and mainly do windshield wiper motions with this one because I wanna keep it directly into that crease of my eyeball. So there's that. So the other thing that I really like to do that's very helpful to me when blending eyeshadow is going back to the brushes that I've used previously and going over the edges of what I've just done so that everything stays very blended and gives me that nice gradient. I'm going to that next category of blending brushes that are still fluffy but a little bit denser. I'm gonna go into this shade here on this end. Yep, and just really pack some of that product onto the brush, tap it off good bit, because you can always add more, but you can't, it's a lot more difficult to take it away. So we are slowly building up the pigment here. Taking this and I'm gonna concentrate more on my outer corner here, on the outer part of my lid. In case you're wondering, I do this because it opens up my eyes. This is definitely something to keep in mind if you have eyes that are closer together or further apart. It can pull your eyes outwards if you put darker shadows on the outside. Same thing as far as shading with contour and highlighter on your face. The darker the shadows are, it's gonna pull that part of the eye back. You're gonna use the lighter shadows to pull that part of your eye forward. So the darker shadow being on the outer corner is gonna pull this back, and I'm gonna apply the shimmer more to the center of my lid, which is gonna pull that part forward and make my eye look a bit more rounded. I wanna pull the part of my eye forward that is in the middle, where typically my irises are, so it's gonna make my eye color pop, my eyeball pop a bit more. So that's just something to keep in mind when you are placing colors of eyeshadow on your eyelid. I'm using very small blending motions with the darker the shades get, the more smaller my blending motions become, because I want to place them very precisely. So I don't want to blend it everywhere. I want to just keep it exactly where I want to place it. And the other thing I want to start to do at this stage when I add my darker shadows is, because I have hooded eyelids, when I'm looking down versus when I'm looking straight on, my eye shape changes a bit and I lose eyelid space because I have those hooded eyelids. So I'm gonna start to look more straight on. I'm gonna just check after I blend for a bit and look straight on to see how that dark shadow is looking, if it's coming up high enough. If you do have hooded lids like I do, just make sure that you are looking straight on every once in a while to check exactly where the placement is. It's gonna look different than it does when you're looking down, because when I look down here, I have all this eyelid space, and then when I look straight on, I have much less. So the other thing with blending eyeshadows is take your time. It doesn't happen in just a second. It definitely takes some work. It definitely takes some time. I'm going back in with that previous brush that I used. Right, so I am happy with how that's looking. Next, I'm gonna go in with my darkest shade that I'm gonna use for today, which is gonna be this shade right here. No, I think I'm gonna use this reddish toned one right here, this nice terracotta shade. I'm gonna use that on a pinched fluffy brush. I don't really know what they're called, so I'm just gonna call them pinched if they, you know, are like that. If they're that style. So I'm gonna use this pinched fluffy brush, and I'm gonna take that reddish shade on it, and I'm gonna concentrate this. I'm gonna look as far down as I can. I'm gonna concentrate this closest to the lash line and to my outer corner. And I'm just lightly blending this and building it up. And honestly, I do close my eyes sometimes when I'm blending this far down on my lash line, just because I can feel exactly where it is. So there's that. Now I'm gonna go back in with that pointier brush, because I think I've decided I want a bit more definition on these outer creases here. So I'm gonna take a mix of this shade and this shade right here up into my outer crease. Much better. Oh yes. I am happy with that, and I'm gonna go over one more time, final time, with the first fluffy brush that I used, just over the very top edges. I mean, I'm basically in my eyebrow here, just to make sure that those edges are nice and diffused. And also, I didn't add any more product to this brush. So there's that. There is the matte shadows applied to the top lid there. Now, I'm gonna start going in with some shimmers. Oh, I should have brought a spray out here. Let me go grab one real quick. Now that we're moving into shimmers here, which one shall I use? Which one? I think I'll show you the lightest and the darkest one. Although I will say this medium shade right here is my very favorite. Oh, so pretty. Okay, but yeah, it's a nice mid-tone bronze. I think I'm gonna mix the deepest and the lightest today to kind of show you guys what my deal is. So, applying shimmers, there's lots of ways to do it. My personal favorite is usually applying with my fingers first. So I'm gonna take the deepest shade right here in this palette on my little ring finger. I'm gonna really get a nice layer of product on there. And I'm just gonna press and swipe this onto my lid. Ooh, what a nice chocolatey brown shimmer. Nice little smoky moment. Same thing on the other eye. Pressing and swiping simultaneously. And honestly, you tend to get the best finish with your fingers with a lot of shadows, with a lot of shimmers. But if you find that it's just not intense enough for you, you guys already know this trick that I've already showed you in the past is to take one of my little flat packing brushes, and I'm gonna really load one side of the brush up with that product, really load it up. And I'm gonna spray just a couple sprays of just any setting spray product. This is just some MAC Fix Plus, one of the classics. And then I'm just gonna swipe over my lid with that, and it just adds the most intense shine. It takes the shimmer metallic shade to the best it can be, honestly. A beautiful shade. So that's that deep one. And I think for this look, I'm gonna take the lightest shade in this little trio here, and I'm gonna take it on, I'm gonna do it a brush because I want this to be a very precise application. I'm gonna take this really tiny little flat brush and do the same thing. I'm gonna load the brush up with that really light gold shade. I'm just gonna spray it, and I'm gonna apply this to the center of my lid, as I was mentioning earlier, to give it a nice pop to the center of my lid. And I'm gonna go over that with my finger once I apply it exactly where I want it. I just like to tap over it because it's blending those harsh lines together so that there isn't such a stark difference between the shades. It just kind of looks like my eyelid has a nice, I don't know, it gives it a more 3D type effect to it. And now I'm just gonna go back in with that brush that we applied the deep chocolate brown to, and I'm gonna go over the edges of that light gold shade with this brush, just with whatever product is left over on it. So that is all the eyeshadow that I'm gonna apply to my upper lid. So when I look straight on, we have a nice effect. We have the shadows that are pulling my eye back and the light that is pushing my eye forward to give it a nice dimensional look. So now I'm gonna go do the whole rest of my face, and then I'll come back and we'll do the lower lash line. For you guys, this is gonna be like a 1 second thing, and for me, 20 minutes will have gone by, so what a time. BRB. And voila, it is magic. I am here with the rest of my face done. All we have left to do is the lower lash line. So let's go ahead and get into that. So for the lower lash line, I'm gonna go in probably mainly with these two shades right here, this light brown shade and then this deeper one. So those are the two I'll be referring to. I'm gonna start with this large pencil brush, go in with that lighter brown shade that I mentioned, tap it off, go right underneath against my lash line, very lightly, a little bit more. And typically I will take this shade almost all the way in, not quite to my inner corner about here, because I want to keep that inner corner bright. And I do the same thing as I did on the upper lid, is I pretty much take this lighter shade almost all the way in, but then as the deeper the shade gets, the more I keep it towards the outer corner. And here we're keeping it quite simple. I'm just doing 2 shades, nothing super fancy. So yeah, I've got that light shade on, and now I'm gonna go in with a smaller brush, with that other smaller pencil brush that I mentioned, and with that deeper brown shade. And I'm just gonna keep this on the outer half of my lash line. And I'm gonna go back in with that larger pencil brush. I'm not gonna add any product. I'm just gonna go over the middle where those two shadow shades meet and blend them together so we get a nice gradient, and I'm just very lightly blending that. So that is the lower lash line. Before I go, I wanted to go over, I mentioned all those brush shapes in the beginning of the video, and now I just want to mention to you a couple brands that I think have some pretty great brushes. Honestly, you do not need to spend a lot of money. Morphe is an excellent brush brand that is available at Ulta. They're very affordable. Their brushes range from like $4 to like $11 or $12 at most. Very cheap brushes. Their eye brushes are gonna be around $5 to $8. Another brand I think is great for eye brushes is e.l.f. This is actually from the e.l.f. J. Kissa collection. It's a little brush set. I think it's a great brush set. It actually also had a couple of the brushes that I used in the look are from this set, and I will link that down below. I'm pretty sure it's still available, but either way, e.l.f. has some great brushes. So if you see any brush shapes that you like, honestly, I'd say pick them up. Other brand that is honestly one of my very favorites is Real Techniques. Real Techniques has some of my favorite brushes of all time overall. I love their face brushes especially, and I love a lot of their eye brushes as well. This lower lash line eye brush is my favorite lower lash line brush for sure. They have excellent quality brushes for a great price. You can find them literally anywhere: Walmart, Walgreens, Target, I mean everywhere. Ulta, they have ton of retailers. They have great brushes, they have great sponges, just great tools overall. Another brand that is good and affordable is EcoTools. EcoTools has great brushes. If you see a shape that you like, honestly, I'd say try it out, as well as the Sephora collection, the house brand from Sephora. They have really nice quality brushes for a pretty good price, and then we get into the mid-range, which honestly, I'd say start out with trying some more affordable brushes before you move up, because for me, I will spend a little bit more on brushes now because I know what I like in brush shapes. So I'd say once you kind of learn your preferences as far as brush shapes from testing out some cheap brands, then, you know, go from there. So that is some brands, and I will be sure, I'll link a couple brush sets in the description box below. I'll link that e.l.f. one, maybe more if you want, and probably I'll definitely link some Real Techniques brush sets that I think are awesome. So with that said, I think that is everything for me today. This was a super fun video to film. Yeah, I really like doing these super in-depth videos, I think, on specific topics. So if you have any other topics, possibly face, or I could do specifically one on base and then one on like cheek products, so bronzer, blush, highlighter, and do one specifically on, you know, primer, foundation, concealer. So those kinds of categories maybe. I could do one on eyebrows, whatever. Definitely leave me some suggestions down below. The other thing I was thinking when doing this video is I also love cream eyeshadows, as you guys know. And I think cream eyeshadows are an excellent option for those of us who just want to keep it really simple. I would love to do, I probably will end up doing, honestly, if this video does pretty well, I probably will end up doing another eyeshadow video based on just cream eyeshadows, and kind of like one and done eyeshadows, things that are really easy. And also because I think that cream formulas are a bit better for more mature skin. So I'd love to put some options out there for those of you with mature skin. So I'd love to do a video on that possibly. So maybe keep an eye out for that video coming in the next little while. If I feel, I don't know, I feel like I should space them out some, because eyeshadow video, it's a lot of eyeshadow very close together. But also at the same time, I mean, this is like the only time I'll put on lipstick for the next couple weeks, because we wear masks everywhere. So we're really just focusing on the eyes right now anyway in life. So that's all we really can do with makeup right now. So that's all we got for you today. So thank you guys so much for being here. That probably one other person that's watched that. Yeah, there's probably only like one person that's watched until this point. So if that's you, you win. You're a great friend. I appreciate you. Let me know if that's you. Probably my grandmother, because Barbara's the real one. All right, well, shout out to you, grandmama. Okay, that's all for this video. Thank you guys so much for being here today, and I will see you guys in next week's video. Bye.